What's up, guys? Justin from Tame Type 1 here, and today I'm going to answer another YouTube comment. Like I said, I'm going to be responding to some of these YouTube comments. If they sort of inspire me to talk about something, yes, I will make a video about it. So be sure to leave whatever comments, suggestions, stories, questions, whatever you can think of, whatever inspires you, leave them below, because I do read them all, and it does help get me through the day, right? But today we're going to talk a little bit about a question that Cheryl asked me about, managing low blood sugar. I made a video recently about keeping on target, but I focused majority on dealing with higher blood sugars, with actually correcting down from a high blood sugar. And I did that because um, I've actually made videos about correcting lows in the past, but it's been a long time, there's a lot I could expound on, so I'll go ahead and get into it. First, I'm going to read this comment. Cheryl says, question, going carnivore and concerned about how to handle insulin reactions and low sugars. Currently, I usually use glucose tabs, but they take much longer than 15 minutes to raise my glucose. Then, when it usually goes up, it skyrockets. Someone on FB said to use sugar packets, but I just ordered 100 packets to give them a try. I have a HX, I assume they mean habit. I have a habit of overdoing honey as I chug it straight from the bottle. That's real. Recommendations, please. Thanks. Type 1 since age 20, now 43. Last HbA1c 6.3. Okay, so I guess the first question I would ask is, what insulin are you taking? If you're on a low-carb approach, or if you're on a carnivore approach especially, are you taking Humalog, are you taking Novolog, or are you taking something like our insulin, which I can link a video below explaining why, but for me, at least, it's a lot better at managing the protein spikes from carnivore compared to something like Humalog or Novolog. First, what kind of insulin are you using? Are you using one that best fits your approach? The second thing I would say is you made a very good observation there. In fact, usually it takes more than 15 minutes to raise your blood sugar from a low with glucose tabs or with most other solid foods. This whole idea of like doctors will say, oh, 15 grams, 15 minutes, as in you take 15 grams of carbs if you're low, and you wait 15 minutes to see if your blood sugar goes up, and if it doesn't, take more. That is, in my experience, personally, and others, bogus. I don't know why they say this. I think they just take an aggressive approach with lows in general because of the context, which I can get into in a minute. But they really, 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 really don't want people to go too low, so they tell you to take a good amount of carbs and, don't wait too long before you need to take more. But the truth of the matter is, yeah, it honestly, from my experience, it takes more around half an hour to fully see the effects of whatever glucose tabs or whatever solid food you're eating to see the full impact on your blood sugar from it. It takes more around 30 minutes, not 15. So that's, for starters, you're on the right track there. And what will happen, and this depends on the context, right? But let's say your blood sugar is low and it's not going lower. Let's say it's just low and you have to fix it. For one, if you're on a carnivore approach and you take 15 grams, that's going to be too much. Because when you're on this kind of approach, when you cut out a lot of the carbs, your body's a little bit more carb intolerant, and so you don't need as many to get up from a low. Often I'll just take, instead of 4 glucose tabs, which is what's recommended, 16 grams of sugar, I'll take maybe 1 or 2 to fix a low, right? Again, it's because of that carb intolerance, and also you don't want to go, past 100 to correct your low. You don't want to go from 60 to 120, and then suddenly you're a little bit too high. You want to go from 60 to 80, 60 to 90, something within this range, right? And so to do that, you don't need 15 grams. You need maybe less than that. Now, of course, I'm not trying to give you a prescription here. I'm not saying how much you need. You know from your own experience how much you need, but that's my personal experience, right? And what will happen is, you wait 15 minutes, you eat a couple glucose tabs, and your blood sugar, you're still feeling pretty low. Well, you take more. And then suddenly, your blood sugar is too high. What happened? Well, you didn't let those glucose tabs do all their work. And so while they're still working, you added more to it, And so because you add more, you end up overshooting. And this kind of thing happens all the time. It is so common. It is half of the battle when it comes to that blood sugar roller coaster that we're trying to get off of. You're injecting too much when you're too high, and you're taking too much sugar when you're too low because you're not being patient with it and you're overdoing it. This happens all the time. And a big part of managing diabetes is making sure that whenever you correct a low blood sugar, you're ending up where you want to be and no higher. Because if you're having to correct, then you risk going too low again, and it's just causing all these different issues, right? So you want to end up where you want to be. And to get there, it comes down to understanding the context of this low, namely, and also understanding the quickness and the effect, like the overall impact of whatever you're using to treat that low, and also just portion control. Like in this comment, she mentioned that she tries using honey, which I recommended class, particularly when I was like pure carnivore. Honey is kind of your only option, right? Because it comes from bees. Technically, it's not a plant thing, right? So, you know, I would recommend honey on a very pure carnivore, PKD kind of approach, because that's kind of what you'd have to use. Do I use honey normally? Not really. And I mean, it's hard to portion control something like honey, something sticky, icky like that. You can't really put it in a little disc and eat it. It's in a bottle, and you can overdo that very easily. Now, as far as using something quicker goes, by the way, I'll mention this as far as in the topic of portion control. Probably the quickest thing you can use would be liquid, because a liquid glucose is going to hit your body faster than a solid would, because it takes you don't have to worry about digesting it. It's just going straight in. And for that, yeah, you can expect a much more rapid rise. And that's really useful if you're on the go, if you're exercising, something like this. And obviously the easiest solution to that would be like juice. But again, you have this big problem with juice that it's not portioned in small enough sizes to not make you overshoot. If you just get a juice box and you put your straw in it, you chug the whole thing, and when your blood sugar is low, you might go way too high because that juice box might have 20 to 30, 40 grams of carbs in it. That's way too much. You don't need that much, typically, unless you're dropping like a rock, right? So for that kind of situation, liquid glucose is great, but you have to find a way to portion it. I have a video that I'll link below where I found these nice little bottles that are perfect for just having, 4 to 8 grams of liquid sugar in them. And I'll link that to you below. Now, outside of portioning, outside of the substance of what you're eating, the timing, and sort of experimenting with yourself as far as how much sugar affects you when you're low, I sort of have a system of, if my blood sugar is this low, I take this much. If it's this low, I take this much. Sort of like a scale, right? And I base that on my experience. So you should do the same thing. Just over time, write it down or keep it in your head. Track how that sugar affects you when you take it for low, and where you start, where you end up. And from there, you're going to be able to gauge more effectively how to keep it just enough to get you exactly where you want to be and no further, right? So far, just let me recap. Portion control, wait it out if it's solid foods or glucose tabs or whatever it is, and know thyself. Know exactly what to do. Now, there's another big part of this. I mentioned it earlier. Context, context, context. Blood sugar is kind of a moving target when you're low as well. So let me give you an example here. Let's say your blood sugar is low. Why is it low? Is it low because you injected insulin a few hours ago and just the tip tail end of it has gotten you too low, and all you need is to correct a little bit and it's going to be good? Or is your blood sugar going low because, let's say, God forbid, you accidentally mixed up your insulin? Let's say you took 7 units of Humalog instead of 7 units of your long-acting Tresiba or Lantus or whatever it is. Uh-oh. Big problem. Big problem. You're dropping like a rocket real quick right after this correction that you weren't supposed to take. Well, that little bit of sugar is not going to cover it because you know that you just took way more insulin than you needed. It's affecting you now. You're dropping like a rock. So in that situation, you're kind of just you want to deal with the best you can, and yeah, you're going to need to take a little bit more sugar, not be a little bit more aggressive, but just keep that context in mind. You know, it's not just a number. Think about where it's going to be based on what you've just done, based on what you did maybe an hour or two ago. You know, think about it, parse it out. Critical thinking. It's a big math game. It's a big prediction game. It's like an engineering puzzle, almost. So keep that context in mind when you're correcting a low too. You know, don't assume um, that low is stagnant. In fact, sometimes that low might take care of itself. Let's say you just ate a meal, right? And you probably took, maybe you didn't take as much insulin as you should have, but your blood sugar is a little bit low. Well, that might correct itself. You might not have to worry too much about it. So again, just keep the context in mind. Consider what you've eaten before, what you dosed before, what could be causing the low. If there's anything in your system that might bring it back up, don't be too cautious. You know, you still want to get your blood sugar back up. You don't want to be low, obviously. You got to take care of that, especially if it's going down. And another example, I'll just give one last one. If it's nighttime and you're low, big conundrum. You don't want to take too much because then you're going to wake up super high. But if you take too little, well, you're going to be low in the night, and that's risky, right? So, especially at night, really consider the context, and while you don't want to overdo it, you definitely don't want to underdo it. I'll leave it at that. Keep taming your type 1. That's sort of my thoughts on the situation. Cheryl, I hope this helped you out a little bit. Hope whatever viewers are checking this out. Until next time, see you around. Actually, one more thing I'll mention is that my experience as far as dealing with lows go is all without a pump. I haven't used a pump for quite a few years now. I use just normal syringes and insulin, and it works great for me. If you're on a pump, the game changes quite a lot, especially when it comes to lows, because especially the pumps that use a CGM, the pumps that don't, whatever. But if it's a modern pump and it uses a CGM to control things, that pump is going to shut off your insulin whenever you get below a certain threshold. And I'm preaching to the choir, everyone knows that. But I just wanted to mention that in case you're on a pump and you're taking all this advice to heart. Know that the game changes quite a lot when you have a pump because the context is now not just, okay, my blood sugar is going low because of this or this reason, but also my pump just turned my insulin off and now my blood sugar is going to start going up because of that. Unless you have it turned off. I'm not sure if you can turn it off, what the settings are for that pump. But if you have that on and your insulin, your basal is going down because your blood sugar went down or it's just being turned off, keep that in mind as well. You might want to maybe correct less than you would otherwise if you're kind of new to a pump, for example. Just keep that in mind, you're taming type 1. Keep in mind that context. If your pump is shutting off that insulin, keep that in mind as well because you don't want to be surprised by a high blood sugar because your insulin off and then you ate a bunch of sugar and you all have to deal with the insulin being off, that rise, and also the sugar rise on top of that, right? So just keep that in mind, you're taming type 1. This time for real. I'll see you next time.